All right, the banker's rule. The banker's rule is a slight alteration. Really, it just comes down to what we call N. So as you may or may not know, there are 365 days in the year. So if instead of having an annual pay amount where we're given 5 years, we could maybe be doing a fraction of a year. All right, 90 days would be 90 out of 365. 90 days. It's a fraction of 1 year. So that's 90 out of 365. But if it's the banker's rule, we actually make it out of 360 days. It's really just, it's a technicality more than anything, but you'll be looking as we walk through examples for whether they say use the banker's rule or don't use the banker's rule. So the banker's rule would have 90 days being 90 out of 360 instead. This one is the banker's rule. The other one is if they say don't use the banker's rule, no bankers. Sorry, I got a little messy. No. It's even worse. I'm sorry. Banker's rule. All right, so that's what we're looking for in these cases. And as I wrote a little example up here, it's the number of days in the period out of the number of days in a year. If you're using the banker's rule, you do it out of 360. If you're not using the banker's rule, it's out of 365. All right, I'm going to go ahead and dive straight into this next example. We'll make it part of the same video. So you borrow $375 for 90 days at a simple interest rate of 5.5%. What is the interest on the loan? Be sure to use the banker's rule. We're using the banker's rule. There's 360 days in a year, according to the banker's rule. All right, so what are we given here? We have our initial amount. We have our number of days. We have our rate. Our initial amount. N, it's not 90. It's not 90 years. It's 90 days, which is a fraction of a year. So you make the fraction 90 out of 360. Since we are using the banker's rule, that fraction is going to be our amount of time. And then our rate, again, in decimal form, 2 places, 1, 2, we have to add a 0 in there. We got to carry that place over. It needs a placeholder. So 0.055 is our rate in this case. Now the question on the table is, what is the interest on the loan? All right, so the interest is equal to P naught times R times N. 375 times 90 over 360. I wrote them out of order. It's multiplication is commutative, so you can put that value next if you wanted, but just to keep it consistent with how I wrote it here, P naught R N, P naught R N. Again, you could have them the other way, you're going to get that same value. Now 90 over 360 can simplify, all right? It could be turned into a decimal. It could be turned into a simplified fraction. When it can't, when it turns into a decimal that you have to round or something, all right, I really don't want you to do that. I would prefer you to enter everything into your calculator at once and not round anything until it is your final answer. And that's because results will change as you go. And if there's some confusion on what I mean by that, I would really like you to just confirm that every time you do an example, you are doing it in your calculator and you are writing the same thing down to the decimal that I end up with here. All right, so for example, for this one, when I put it into my calculator, we had 5.15625. If you had 5.17 or 5.157, All right, I would really like you to make sure that however you're inputting it into your calculator, you are getting this exact thing. Now, this isn't going to be our final answer either because we are talking about money here. We're talking about an interest, all right? And when we do deal with money, we go to cents. We go 2 places past the decimal, right? 10 cents, 70 cents, 72 cents. All right, so we are going to go ahead and round this to say, hey, the interest on this is 5.1. We have to look at this guy to determine if that 5 rounds up or down. We have to look at the 6. 6 is 5 or above, which means that 5 in front of it gets rounded up. 5.16 is going to be our amount there. Right, so that's the interest. It says, what's the loan's future value? Well, the loan's future value was the initial plus the interest, which in this case is 375 plus 5.16. So that's going to be $380.16. We also could have found this instead by starting from scratch on that other formula we'd had. 1 plus RN. If we hadn't already calculated the interest in our part A here, we could use this formula instead, and it's going to get the exact same thing. We would put in the 375, we would multiply by 1 plus R times N. Now, I would encourage you, even if you were fine doing it the way we had done before, go ahead and put this in your calculator. Because again, if we had started straight on this step, this is the approach we probably would have taken. So you need to make sure that you are inputting this into your calculator with all of the necessary parentheses to ensure that you are getting the exact same result. When you put this in, you should be getting, I believe, 380.15625. All right, and then of course we round that in the same way we round the one up above. We're looking at this value to determine if that 5 is staying the same or going up. Since it is a 6 that follows, 6 is 5 or above, so we round it up. All right, again, if you're getting lost at any one of these points, especially with the calculator, please make sure you're reaching out to me. Please make sure you're reaching out to the tutoring department, the people in the math department, just to make sure that we are nipping that in the bud early on and we're able to kind of get the clarity that you need to be able to move forward into the next sections as well.